You're tuned in to RX Radio.
Hello and welcome to RX'D Radio with myself, James Mack, and James Thayer. Dude, my lab yesterday, or the day before, Eric Bruguera, shout out Eric Bruguera, one of our educators and currently taking people through the hypertrophy course, dude was calling me James the whole time. And like halfway through the lab, it was throwing us both off because halfway through the lab, he was just like, why the fuck am I calling you James? And then like we landed up like, he was like, well, I don't know what's going on. Both of us like kept kind of not being able to understand what was going on around why we were calling each other. Like I was even calling him Eric. I don't know why.
So
I have no idea.
Informal.
I know, especially my lab. My lab is probably the most informal out of all of them. Like that's just how it runs. But it was just extremely strange, and I didn't know what was going on. And halfway through, my life became a lot more comfortable. And after the week that I've had, like that threw things even worse. But yeah, dude, he called me James. I was like, I don't know who like, in the group has ever.
Nobody called me over the internet calls you James.
No.
Like the only time we do that is here for the intros.
Actually, yeah, good point. The only time is I call myself James Mack, and I don't know. It just it's
so strange. One of my because like I only ever refer to you as Mac, but one of my favorite things is like people think that's your last name and don't understand that's even an abbreviated version of your last name.
Fun fact. I used to be called when I was a medic. My nickname was Jam. Now, my nickname, I think I don't even remember if have I told this story? I swear I've told this story. So it was Jam. I can't remember. Okay, here's some exposure. Or exposing myself once again, just throwing all the dirty laundry out there. But my initials are JAM. Okay. James Alexander McIntosh, like that's where it is. So it's JAM is my initials. So when I started paramedics, they found this out, and then they started calling me Jam. And then I got deployed to a ski resort. So I was on contract in a ski resort. I was the medic up there with my good mate Chris. I think I have told the story.
This part of it you've told.
Fun fact: if you guys remember this, this is hilarious. Anyway, so we were in Africa in Lesotho, and I was on shift, but I wasn't on shift. So as long as one of us was sober and not drinking huge amounts of alcohol at the gondola, it was fine. And it was my turn to not be, and like some of the other crew had come up. So we were having a bit of a party, and they were trying to get me to introduce myself to one of the ladies that was there. It would be the Anyways, long story short, I ended up taking her home in the ambulance after being very, very drunk. And I drove the ambulance home and then couldn't figure out why everyone knew that I was at her bedroom. I thought I'd like managed to sneak this and no one had seen anything.
Doing it on the sly.
But do you remember this? Do you remember the story? I'm pretty sure. Anyways, and I left the ambulance with the lights on. Just the lights going outside her bedroom to her house. And it was on the top of the mountain and everyone could see. Yeah. Anyways, so...
I mean, the only other thing that you could have done is come over the intercom just to alert everyone that you were there. Outside of that, I think you took every step possible to let people know where you were. If anything, you can just say, hey, you were an EMT on call, that if anybody needed you, they knew where to find you.
That was bad. Anyways, so I'm at a ski resort. If you guys have never been introduced to snow and like actual snow where you're skiing, you wear ski pants. So I wore medic ski pants. Now medic ski pants are like ski pants, but they're tougher. So they're kind of like a tent-like material. Very hard and very firm. Now this young lady that I went back to her room with, I don't even know how to say this without sounding so slutty, but we obviously were hooking up, and we were trying to like move in the direction of doing the dirty deed, if we were, and that never happened. So I lay there pitching a tent the whole night. So my nickname changed from Jam to Camper Jam for the rest of my entire. So that was my nickname
Oh.
for a very long time, being a paramedic.
So-
It's Camper Jam
but
because
with
I
that,
pitched a tent for like 12 hours. God,
It's
Yeah.
dual purpose service because it reminds me of the scene from The Town whenever they're sitting down for lunch and the chick comes back that was involved in the bank robbery and she's like, "Did you say your name was Jim or Jim? Like JIM or GEM?" He was like,
Yeah.
"Both." It's like, "Ah, you can keep this one. He's a real Jim." So yeah, just dual purpose with that name. That's beautiful.
So that was.
I don't know the last time you told the story if it got to the
I don't think it
change
got
in
to
name.
that. I don't think it got to that. So I feel like that's a new addition to the story of like, I'm being more vulnerable with you guys. All right, I'm giving you more and more of the details every time we revisit that story. So yeah, that was the nickname. But I much prefer Mac. If we can just stay with Mac, like I'd prefer that. I don't. If anyone of the prescript community calls me Camper Jam, I'm not letting you in my lab.
He's not
That's a
friends with you
pretty-
anymore.
It's just
It's an automatic kick out to the lab.
it's an automatic kick up in the labs. That was one of the best features that I ever found. And poor shout out to Luigi, young prince. Salugi used to cop such shit from me all the time. And now I've just realized that I think he's bigger than me. So like, and he doesn't come to my lab anymore. But when he used to come to my lab, so there was multiple times, I can't remember. I would just give him shit about something. And then I worked out that when someone comes into the lab, like you obviously admit them in, I worked out that you can send people back to the waiting room. So I used to threaten him all the time of like, Salugi, this better be right, or I'm sending you back to the waiting room. And like, poor panic on this kid's face of like, oh, no. Like, he was obviously always right. I think I sent him back once just to test it. I'll be honest. I think I sent him back once to the waiting room just to test it. And then I let him back in straight away. Right? No, there's no discrimination or anything here. But I didn't quite know that that was a thing. And then I thought it was the greatest feature that Zoom ever came up with. Is that I can just send someone to the waiting room.
You know, with that being said, like it probably is a good teaching method of adding some type of pressure to it because too often, you can just sit on lab, not say anything, and it's like, no, you're either right or you're getting sent out of the lab for timeout period, then you can come back in.
Oh, we can. So we're basically introducing timeouts within our teaching utility these days. Is that what
It's
we're
a
saying?
teaching methodology that we're looking to reintroduce into an educational atmosphere.
All right. Well, come to a lab. We'll try it out.
Yeah.
I
I was going to say, speaking of which, anybody listening to this that has taken any of the prescript courses or is part of the collective, do you want to give a shout out when your lab is? I don't know if we've ever talked about labs on the podcast.
So lab, we do in like introductions and stuff. So labs were designed as labs. Now, if you weren't or haven't gone through a university education, and it's predominantly within like exercise science or some form of anatomy-based education, from my understanding, if I remember correctly. And you have like labs, which is essentially meetings with your fellow classmates, and you'll have either someone who's above you within a year or a couple years above, and they kind of coordinate the discussion with the students who are taking this course together around any questions, concepts that kind of come up, or kind of, a study group, if we were, to some extent, just to kind of allow for better understanding and the practical elements of the educational system to be kind of spoken about. And that was the concept behind labs, and that's when it originally started. Was we wanted to, we kept having more and more discussions around the concepts and the principles that we were bringing out and that we teach you, and it would bring up these really great conversations, but there wasn't a hub or a place where these conversations could kind of be held and really taken advantage of. And that's where we introduced labs. The lab sections started. I was one of the first lab sections. Myself and Shallow started, and then Shallow was traveling, so I took on that, and I think you were in that lab with me as well. So when we first started, and that's how I earmarked you to then become a lab as well, and like it just became this whole thing of where we wanted to add more and more instructors who could kind of facilitate the discussions. Not just answer questions, but also start to ask. Get the students to start thinking for themselves and start to really apply what the principles were that we were teaching. So my lab is on it's a Wednesday morning in Australia at 8 a.m., which I think is
Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or I guess, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the state side.
In the state side, and then obviously, wherever you are, depending. I get quite a few of the UK guys as well, if they stay up late. We've got Junta's lab, who is it ends up being like my 12 a.m. on a Wednesday or Thursday morning, I think.
And then it's Wednesday at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Yes. And then we've got Killian's lab as well, which is the day before mine. So that's a Monday, Tuesday?
It's Tuesday for me. Because
so
Tuesday
it's
for me
Wednesday.
at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard.
And then we have yours, which is on a Sunday.
Yeah, correct? Sunday at 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, the Technique Lab, which you can get access to through Discord right afterward, through the collective right afterwards. So it's at 10 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. I guess mine's 9 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. It's 8 o'clock Central Standard Time.
So that's the Technique Labs as well, and that's part of the collective service. I mean, like we've spoken about this before, but I think the collective is still it's the most valuable service out there for the price that you get. Like you get access to all of us within the Discord. You get access to the conversations going. It's been heated this week in terms of it's just been popping off, which is great.
Yeah, it's been blowing up.
It's been super. Yeah, blowing up's the right word, not heated. Heated means something's wrong, but it's been blowing up this week, which is really cool. Nice to see some of the concepts, and I think a lot of that has to do with the hypertrophy course going off. Shout out to Eric. And just coming into the new iterations of Barbell, which is in June, I think. That's exciting. I like Barbell. Big fan of Barbell Course, and I think the Barbell Course is. I can't remember if I've spoken about this before, but the Barbell Course gets the reputation for being a powerlifting course, and it's so much more than just a powerlifting course. It's obviously taught by both Shallow and Stu Locke. My opinion, probably one of the best powerlifting coaches within the country.
Know what I just realized? We're going to have to get Stu on for an episode since the course is coming out.
Sick. All right, well, Stu's going to land up being that's going to be epic. I'm so excited about that. We'll try to get Stu on. Stu's a unique fella. He's probably one of the strongest men that I've ever met. I will be honest. I've never seen someone move a barbell at the speed that he does, at the weight that he does, and probably one of the most genuinely nice guys I've ever met. He's scary. He can look very intimidating, but he is genuinely one of the most caring teddy bear human beings that you can ever interact with. And he is and he's a great educator. And I was going to say
he's very thoughtful in his approaches, not just on a barbell, but I mean, just some of the outside conversations that we've had, or like some of the philosophy conversations, or philosophers, great discussions there. But with that, it's also they're doing their first in person with barbell. So whether you've looking to sign up for the course or you've taken the course before, there's going to be a 2-day barbell workshop in Miami. So anybody listening to this, plan on going to Florida in June.
Do it. All jokes aside. So the idea behind that is you have both the practical side of it. So if you do the barbell course in person, you do also then get access to the online education side of it at the same time. sorry, at the same time, when I say at the same time, you start like a week later, if I remember correctly. Oh, sorry, a week after the practical is done. The barbell course then goes through. That's 8 weeks, 8 weeks of barbell course. Video library, you get the barbell manual with it as well.
Which
The
is
most
huge.
comprehensive book on the squat, bench, deadlift, and all of its variations that you will possibly use in your entire lifetime. And what I was alluding to originally and where I was really going with it was it's not a powerlifting course. It does teach you about powerlifting in the aspect of the squat, bench, deadlift. But if you are a personal trainer or just a person who is training, you use a barbell. You use a barbell in any means into any one of these variations. You probably squat. You probably do some form of deadlift or deadlift variation. And we know that you bench press, definitely bench press. So I would jump onto it and further expand your knowledge into what you can do and how you can progress and optimize and regress, which is, I think, one of the most important things that we always hone in on about. It's like, it's not just about being able to squat, for example. It's understanding when you should squat, when not to squat, what variations of the squat could we utilize if we can't squat. And I think being able to really hone in on those is a very important part of the course. So we somehow landed up doing a advertisement for the course at the same time, while I was somehow
Hell yeah.
telling you about my
This
nickname.
new intro style
this new intro
just
style
opens
works
up so many avenues.
very well, apparently. So, yeah, that's Barbell. That starts on the 22nd of June. 22nd or 24th of June, if I remember correctly. That's up for sale on the website. So is the in-person is on the website, so jump over onto that. Where we were kind of wanting to go with this, I guess, after all of this, is we've both been seeing a lot of algorithm-based things going on Instagram to do with supplements. Yes.
Yeah, it's been interesting, and kind of like the prominent one in my algorithm where we're having the discussion of like creatine was the big one that kind of initiated the conversation that it it's a very beneficial supplement, and it's kind of standard a lot of times in some of like people's starter kit. Like if somebody's trying to build out a supplement starter kit, it's typically a very standardized one. It's very cheap, very effective, very researched. But it's interesting with the industry being how it is that you always kind of see this cyclical nature of similar conversations, training styles like emerge their head over the years, whether that's a 5-10 year rotation. And one of the ones I've started noticing more and more is a lot of questions through different people answering questions or people bringing up the conversation and kind of explaining creatine specifically. So, in that discussion of us seeing this a lot more, it kind of prompted what we would look at as a supplement starter kit and why we would pick some of those, how those can be beneficial. So, whether you're somebody listening to this and looking at utilizing supplements for your training, or if you're a coach and you're getting the questions from your clients and wanting to kind of give them some answers, give them some direction, I thought this could be a meaningful and useful conversation.
Yeah.
And yeah, kind of that. I think an easy one to start with is creatine because it is pretty standard in most starter kits that you'll see.
Yeah, I think understanding that creatine is one of the world's most researched substances and research supplements. Now, if you are into supplementation and you are into, reading about effects of it and stuff like that, I highly recommend getting a subscription to examine.com. Now, examine.com is a research entity or a publication entity, if we were, that allows for researchers to third party analyze lots of different like claims of supplements and go through the efficacies of with dosages, durations, kind of taking a meta analysis of all of the supplementations and all of the research into the supplementations, the different supplements in itself. And it is great information. It is Examine.com is all about supplements. That's all. That's all there. There's no other research articles. It's not about training. It's not about anything else. It's about supplementation, supplement only. And you can go and do years worth of research into any type of supplements that you were looking at or wanted to from that. So that's kind of the first thing I would say. If you're looking at learning more about this, examine.com is your resource for supplementation in general, and to find out if something would be good or not be good to utilize from that side. Secondly, as we said, creatine is the most researched supplement that I know of, or up there within at least the top 1 to 2, excuse me. And we know that it's been utilized for a very long period of time. A lot of supplement companies utilize it. It gets gets remarketed every now and then with like some new crazy formula, or creatine HCl, which is hydrochloric. Like it's the way that it would be molecularized. Yeah, we'll go molecularized.
We'll use that word.
Yeah, that's the word. It's bullshit. Okay, anything that is not creatine monohydrate, I wouldn't use, because creatine monohydrate is the one that is always utilized as the baseline for supplementation, for all of the research. And even when you go to examine.com and you go and you look at the difference between, so like HCl is supposed to be able to be uptaken better, or better bioavailability than that of like monohydrate, and it is. It clearly isn't. When we look at the research, it actually doesn't do anything. It just costs that much more, and that's why creatine HCl will always be more expensive. Buy the cheap creatine monohydrate. You're always generally looking for like the logo. It says creatine on it, like in writing, because that is like the main source, or kind of the original patent, if we were, of the supplementation. And that's what I would be looking for on any form of like plain creatine monohydrate product. It's usually the cheapest one, to be 100% honest. And a lot of supplement stores, or the dude or lady at the supplement store, will try and not sell you that one because it costs less money, and they can probably get a kickback if they push you into the HCl or something along those lines. Fun fact, yes, that does happen. So just tell them you're looking for monohydrate. Buy monohydrate. Buy it in like a 1 kilogram bag or a 500 gram bag. I don't know what that is in freedom units. You can usually just buy it from most supplement brands. Will have some form of creatine monohydrate as a pure product, is what they kind of call it. Or you could go to iHerb and just order it online. Or if you're in Canada, there's bulk Canadian supplements, Canadian bulk, whatever it's called, something along those lines. You can find creatine monohydrate anywhere. Dosing for creatine monohydrate, anywhere from like 3 to 5 grams daily. You can split that. You can take it in the morning. You can take it in the evening. You can take it with your pre-workout. A lot of people will take it with their pre-workout. I would just say, as long as you're kind of consistent with it, it doesn't really matter. One of the main concerns predominantly around females, or the conversation that will come up with females, is like creatine monohydrate makes you hold water. And like they'll have like an increase in water weight. Now that's essentially what it does to a certain degree, because what we're kind of looking at with creatine monohydrate is it does help with mitochondrial function, or the efficacy of the function within the mitochondria. That means that we're able to kind of utilize the mitochondria, or we're giving better nutrients to the mitochondria. We're giving kind of an increase in hydration, an increase in these nutrients in terms of these vitamins that are going into like the musculature and going into the fibers. And it can, to a certain degree, increase the volume of the tissue, or the volume of fluid and glycogen that is in the muscle. So you may have a fuller look, you may have a bigger look, if we were, from kind of the creatine. Generally, it subsides. It doesn't necessarily like hold water, if we were. You're not going to be holding inflammation or water to the extent of like fat is generally what it is. So that's generally the concern that tends to come up. I'm a big fan of creatine monohydrate for a couple of reasons. As I kind of said, one, we look at like fuel supply efficacy, mitochondrial health, and like it does kind of form into as a myostatin inhibitor as well. It can be one of the, like, it's not natural, but one of the baseline supplements that we can utilize in both a natural and an enhanced athlete stack. Just a little disclaimer, there are aspects of this that I think if you can get supplementation right within a natural ability and you hit your natural peak, your genetic potential from there, and you do want to dabble into the more performance enhancing sides, there's a lot of carryover of still keeping in these basic new supplementation stacks, or these basic whatever we're calling them, so the basic stack of supplements that you don't just like take out because you've now started to kind of play into the hormonal side, in my opinion. Now, when we're not saying yes or no, but at the same time, we're talking base supplements from now, and I think creatine monohydrate is one of those that I would definitely have. There is links to it in terms of helping with neurodegenerative diseases, so like stuff like Alzheimer's, stuff like that. There is some form of research into it helping, not necessarily helping to reverse, but more so to help inhibit or kind of prolong. The research with that gets better and better as time goes on, because unfortunately that is a time-based disease or time-based problem that we have. So kind of more and more time goes on, the more and more these research studies can provide us with information. And once again, going to examine.com is probably your best bet to get an idea from that. The only thing that I will say is like not a contraindication, but something to be aware of with creatine monohydrate is it can sometimes give you a bit of like a upset stomach, or like a little bit of like a stomach just not feeling great. All I would do with that is I'd probably lower the dose or split the dosage up over the day, maybe do 1 gram 3 times a day, and maybe slowly build that up to about that 5 gram, the like top end of where I would kind of go with that. Generally, like most supplement brands will kind of recommend a loading phase of creatine monohydrate. I don't think it's worth it. In my opinion, it's too complex for what we're trying to do. Just 3 to 5 grams a day, leave it at that, and kind of forget about it. Just continually take it on the daily, take it on non-training days, take it on training days. Pretty much go through taking it every day of your life, if you will. That's it. Don't need to take more.
And with that, a couple things that I want to point out, that like two of them at the very beginning that you've spoken to before, but leading on through the discussion is something to keep in mind. First off, with creatine monohydrate specifically, that trademark is very, very important, because if the trademark is on there, they've added something to it. It's not, because nobody can trademark creatine monohydrate. It is the supplement. If you look on the ingredient, that's the only thing in it. No one can trademark that. So anytime there is a trademark, a copyright added to it, that's a company adding something to the supplement. And so if you're looking at like the most cost effective way to introduce this, go strictly creatine monohydrate. The other side of it, the other thing to look out for in the ingredient list, in the nutritional label on further discussion of the thing, is something that you brought up previously, is the blends. Like look at
the blend, the proprietary
blend. Now we're both exactly. Yes, now we were both having issues with it. But yeah, looking at the blends, because it's not going to have certain percentiles, and it might not, depending on where you are, they might not be exact. They probably aren't going to be reported. It'll have listed what's in there, but not the percents based on this. So just going further in the discussion of what might be a like starting supplement stack, keep in mind those two factors are going to continue for anything that we discuss. Something else, like with the front loading with creatine monohydrate, that if you're consuming animal meat, you're probably good on needing to do that front loading. Interesting enough, where creatine monohydrate has been shown to have some of the like greatest advances for somebody as far as being able to perform and carrying some of those benefits, are people that don't have that regularly in their diet, like a vegan, a vegetarian that doesn't have the like animal meat, that it can be it's a very good supplement for that type of diet lifestyle. The other thing that's important to keep in mind, that you mentioned at the very end there, it's not a supplement that you have to cycle off. It's one that you stay within those ranges, you can just stay on it. It's cheap, effective. You don't need to continue to up the dose. You don't need to go in cycles with it. It can just mainstay. And another aspect with it is your body already produces creatine. So we have it already produced in our body, and we get it through our nutrition. So it's something that's not that your body doesn't already have. It's something that we're just looking to add to and looking to benefit if you're going to introduce this supplement. And it has some availability. It's not going to make you the strongest person in the world, but what it does do is it's looking at providing more available ATP that you can utilize to potentially go for longer durations in sets or reps.
Yeah. And I think we probably should have prefaced this at the very beginning. Fuck it, we'll do it now. Understand that supplementation or supplementation use is exactly that. It's to supplement for the deficiencies that we generally have. Now, that doesn't mean that every person needs to go on supplements. There are some supplements that I will argue we will never be able to hit the recommended daily intake, kind of according to the RDI, that we need, i.e., something we'll talk about in a little bit, like a multivitamin, and or creatine. As you're eating red meats, if we were eating animal meats or animal protein from that side, you should start to have a supply or have a upper level supply of creatine. It's not going to harm you to take more or take a supplement version of it, but also understand, like, when we're talking about supplements, you got to have your base shit right. You got to have your calories right. You got to have your macronutrients right. Just adding in supplements for the sake of adding in supplementation, it's not going to help you. It's not going to give you the greatest advantage that you can gain from adding in supplements if you get all the other shit right. You get the basics right. Even if you're just getting kind of your calories and your micronutrient intake in right, kind of hitting your 400 to 500 grams of vegetables, like an assortment of vegetables, and 300 to 400 grams worth of fruit, which is very easy to do on a daily basis. It's like, get those in, and then the supplementation on top of that starts to make a real big difference. And again, it's the top of the pyramid. If we look at like the old school food pyramid, it's the top of the pyramid. We don't want to necessarily be using supplements to completely take over a macronutrients content or macronutrients profile of what we need. We're not going to be just taking X amount of fish oils to supplement my fat intake. Like, that would be stupid. Again, it kind of fits as like a supplement on top of these things. So that's the disclaimer with this whole kind of conversation, I think.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point too of getting the basics down first before even introducing it and seeing where the holes are to see what is needed and what can have an effective impact on the limitations of your diet, or if you're looking of more the performance route, what can kind of fill those gaps and allow you to advance or allow you to kind of progress in some of the areas that you're limited to. But another reason to look at that, because supplements, it's what, a $40 billion industry, if not
It's
more. I
huge.
forget what the last statistics were, or that it's grown to. But with that being said, it also can get very, very expensive very quickly in just trying to get everything. So as far as cost effectiveness, it's important to see, what do you actually need? Let's not go and spend a ton of money that we could take maybe a portion of that or a large portion of that and put it towards food. Like, let's start there and see what needs covered. And hopefully in today we can kind of discuss, and again,
Yes.
moving forward, I think it's a very good base to understand that we're operating from what are we limited to in our nutritional density through our diet that we might need to supplement, but it's not the go-to source, or it's not our first source. We should reflect back in the things that we can do through nutrient dense based foods, and then look at secondarily, once we have that squared away, where we can utilize supplements to be effective, and effective not only in our training but effective in the cost, not just spending money to spend money.
Yeah. So I think that the next one in terms of that is, like, call it base layer, and this one will be subjective or subjected to your inability to hit your protein content. So there's a few here. One, so if you are able to use whole foods and have worked out what your protein content is, now you can kind of like off a baseline, like RDA is 0.8 grams per kilo of body weight, in my opinion. And from what I've done as a coach, etc., I think that is slightly too little. I like to keep kind of my athletes around the 1.8, call it 2 grams per kilo of body weight. I usually use a lean body mass index. But if you're hitting a minimum amount of 2 times body weight in terms of protein content, I think that is more than enough in terms of being able to be sufficient for muscle protein synthesis and like breakdown of muscle, depending on what type of phase you're in. If you are in a deficit or you're going into a dieting phase, you can ramp that up to anywhere to 4 to 5 times body weight in terms of protein. There have been no negative effects to kidneys and those types of things studied or shown of even up to about that 4 to 5 grams per kilo of body weight in terms of that. So I would happily take someone up to 3 grams or 3 times body weight in kilograms as my upper limit of my protein intake. Now, if you do that and you have a client or yourself and you are not able to hit your protein intake from whole foods, whey protein could be a very effective supplement. And again, that's exactly what a supplement is for. It's a great example and kind of gives you exactly where it's necessary or fits into the scale very well, is whey protein. Whey protein is our highest protein concentration of leucine. It generally has like 10 to 13% within that, which is very effective for like our muscle protein synthesis. We're looking at dosing, I would probably say anywhere from 20 to 40 grams, depending on overall protein goals, but I would look at anywhere from 20 to 40 grams of protein in that serving. Taking more does not mean you don't absorb it. It will be absorbed. It just absorbs at a slower rate within the digestion tract. Please understand
I'm so
that it's
happy
not
that you
wasted.
mentioned that.
Oh, that's a standard question.
That becomes such a standard conversation, and I know that it comes from university setting because it's a conversation that I've had with students a lot, and I don't know why it gets brought into this. Is probably like a counter of like the anabolic window, like it's just
You know
kind of
what?
come along that probably at some point, but
I think
I
it's the missing context is generally because it's like your body will absorb 20 to 30 grams of protein in a sitting, and then it doesn't just stop. And I think that's where people miss the context. It's the next part of it.
Yeah, because it's an easy off note, but understanding like, in a setting, but your body is still going to utilize that you're not just, to be blunt, you're not just shitting out raw steak.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. It's like the amino acid profile is still being utilized. It's there. It's broken down into those amino acids, and it's absorbed within the GI tract. Like that's what happens. Now, whey protein within that comes in different forms, and I think that's also the next consideration of which one would we suggest or recommend or use. We generally have whey protein concentrate. So whey protein concentrate is generally a blend of isolate and concentrate. So it's usually like an 80-20 split, if I remember correctly.
it
Something
has
like
like, because it'll have casein in it, and
it'll have casein in it, and it has a blend.
Like the easy way before you get into the much smarter description of this for anybody that's unaware, think of like if you've had a protein shake that is just liquid, like it's very fluid in that's probably isolate. If it's a complex or a complete, that it's a thicker. Like most of the time you're going to see that in like thick smoothies, milkshakes, things like that. Like it's a thicker substance.
100%. That's a great way to kind of like determine the difference. The other side of that is people who are more prone or more sensitive or intolerant to lactose are gonna struggle with that one. All right. If you have lactose or IBS, whey protein concentrate is not your best friend, unfortunately.
Well, and that's an easy way to understand with the recommendations that you're making off of could be a detrimental way to find out, but it's an easy way to understand that, hey, if your supplementation is causing gastrointestinal distress, if you're having some issues, it's probably not the right source for you. We need to look to some other sources, need to look to some alternatives. But if it disagrees with you, you're gonna know. There's
gonna
not
know
gonna be
real
a
fast.
question.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's it. So someone with lactose intolerance or just a sensitivity or GI or IBS symptoms, I would push them towards whey protein isolate and or even hydrolyzed whey protein. Now, the biggest difference is going to be cost. Is going to be significantly higher, especially recently in the last year or so. We've seen whey protein prices shoot through the roof and skyrocket. It's still going to land up being cheaper per serving of like grams of protein than like having a steak or ground beef, etc. But please understand that obviously there is a cost involved, and I think that goes back to the discussion that you were talking about. Is the cost can kind of like really stack up real fast. Whey protein comes with a whole bunch of its micros, its minerals, its vitamins. There's a whole bunch that's kind of within that whole profile, and is a very convenient and easy way to get protein in. Biggest downside or downfall to utilizing whey protein shakes as part of this is generally it is not going to fill you up. It doesn't necessarily come with the satiety levels that we get when we have the equivalent of chicken breasts or of steak. Now, I understand there's going to be slightly other macronutrients within that steak. May have some higher fat. There may be 1 or 2 grams of carbs. There will be some form of carbohydrate intake in the shake as well. Understand that your satiety level is probably going to be decreased. It's a very easy and convenient way. I love using it for my clients who are on the go all the time so that we can still get our regular protein feedings in with the day. I like to have at least 4 meals spread out through the day so we have kind of that muscle protein synthesis or the spike in kind of muscle protein synthesis occurring. We know roughly 4 to 5 meals seems to be pretty accurate or pretty adequate for that to happen. And if they need to, they can do that. They can have some fruit. They can have, some kind of like very easy digestible food at the same time and still make sure we get a good amount of protein in. I think it's a very good way to do it. I'm not against it. I think just finding which type of protein works for you or going through kind of the criteria of like, do I need this? Do I need to supplement my protein intake or am I hitting my protein intake already? If not, let's utilize a whey protein shake. Which whey protein do we need? Do we need concentrate? Do we need isolate? Do we need hydrolyzed or hydrolysized? That's the word. And then with that, it's like, how can we properly utilize this to make some form of meal or make some form of good breakdown or isocaloric meal there? Maybe it's, isocaloric being all 3 macronutrients, protein, carbs, and fats. As I kind of mentioned, maybe it's a whey protein shake, a banana for your carbohydrates, and a handful of almonds, and you got some nuts in there. Great kind of like little meal, great like little isocaloric setting that would work really well on the go, very effective, very adequate. Understand the downsides to it being it is not going to keep you full. Pretty simple, pretty standard.
It has
from that
a
side.
very
Low
the
satiety index.
digestibility on it is very, very quick. Like all of those, and that meal snack, however you want to define it in with your person, but the shake, the banana, the nuts, I think like that's an example of how we can utilize these and be effective, thinking about in macro nutrients and how we compare a supplement still getting whole foods, nutrient dense foods. And honestly, like that example that you just gave, I'd put that up against any protein bar and say go that route instead of the protein bar. Pro tip, if you look at your protein bar and the carbs are higher than the protein, it is not a protein bar, it's a candy bar.
It's a candy bar. And at the same time, protein bars are generally going to be whey protein concentrate because of the cost and the associated with that. It's generally going to be filled with a lot of alcohol sugars as well. There's nothing wrong with alcohol sugars. I've just noticed in my own experience as a coach, a lot of protein bars will have alcohol sugars and multiple types of alcohol sugars as well. So they'll add in 3 or 4 different types. And that can cause a problem to people with some form of sensitivity, with IBS, with some form of GI tract disruption in that sense. And you may be shitting out bricks depending on what it does. So I would stay very far away from protein bars, in my opinion. I'd rather have something of that suggestion of what I kind of gave up. It's very easy. You can pick it up from most convenience stores. So it's something like I like using that type of meal structure because you're able to get that in wherever you are in the world. You can kind of pick up a protein shake, a ready-made protein shake at any kind of gas station or petrol station. You can pick up some nuts generally, and you can pick up some fruit. Very simple, very easy versus kind of getting one bar in, and you're getting a little bit of better micronutrients with the fruit and like the fats that kind of come from that. My next supplement that I would look at is going to be a multivitamin. Now, why I like multivitamins is they fill the gaps that diets leave. Okay, they supplement the gaps that we have in terms of our micronutrient intake. Looking at it nowadays in terms of what we would need in terms of quality of food to actually hit our recommended daily intake of micronutrients. So that's going down to our different vitamins. That's going down into like obviously fiber, vitamin A, vitamin B, our different types of vitamin B, our zinc, our iron, our kind of like our vitamin C, like all of these types of vitamins that we need on the daily basis. It's going to need a high caloric diet to be able to get the amount that we need from the quality of foods that we get now day and age in terms of our vegetables, in terms of our fruit, to be able to make sure that we hit those. Not saying it's impossible, but you are going to be eating, if I remember correctly, from like, and I'd prefer it if someone didn't quote me on this because I may be wrong, but it's of, 4,000 plus calories, and having a large amount of vegetables and fruit from that would kind of like fit into our structure of what would be needed to hit our recommended dietary intake of our micronutrients and our vitamins. Bring in a multivitamin. It works effectively in building phases, in fat loss phases specifically, because obviously we are going to be on low caloric values. We're probably going to have a less amount of these micronutrients coming in. Hot tip with multivitamins: do not buy the multivitamin from your grocery store. Right? That's probably not going to be the most effective or the most bioavailable and absorbable forms. I would generally, as a rule of thumb, look for brands that use like natural or native forms of vitamins. Those will generally be more absorbed or more absorbable forms. Shout out Thorne. So Thorne products, very, very good product. It's a not doctor's recommended product, but you have to be a practitioner. So it's a practitioner product. That would be the multivitamin that I generally prescribe or would suggest. Sorry, I don't prescribe anything. That would be the suggested multivitamin that I use. You can get that from iHerb. You can get that from most, what are they called in the States? Not naturopaths. There's a registered there's some form of doctor or whatever. A naturopath, iHerb. Look at Thorne. Thorne would kind of be the brand that I use and would recommend in terms of that. Take the dosage that the bottle says is generally what I would say in terms of these things. And that's pretty much it from that, to be honest. Multivitamins, I don't think we need more of a discussion. I think everyone should be on some form of multivitamin because they fill in the gaps of the missing nutrients that we have. It's easy to do. It's usually like 2 to 3 tablets in the morning. Smack it back and kind of carry on with your day. You'll see a lot of advantage from taking it.
Yeah, it's pretty cost effective and very, very little, if any, side effects. So there's no real downside to it. It's mostly just upside, and like you said, it fills the gaps where needed.
Yeah. My next one, and I think maybe what are we on? 3, 4, 3. So yeah, 3. The next one that I'm going to suggest,
4.
And this one, a little disclaimer with it. I would prefer, and if I do have clientele when I utilize this, I would prefer a blood test to give me some form of example of what ranges we're actually in before this. In saying that, large amounts of the population will be deficient in it, and that is vitamin D. Now, vitamin D deficiency is huge. All right, it's massive worldwide. We see it obviously in the UK, we see it huge amounts because obviously the amount of sunlight that they do get is that much less, and their UV is that much. It's synthesized as a response to the UV light, so it is on the lower side. The other side of this to be aware of is understanding that your melatonin, like your skin, your actual skin color, and your pigmentation will dictate your ability to synthesize that as well. So personnel or people with darker skins will generally be more vitamin D deficient than that of a lighter nature. And that's just because we don't actually synthesize that UV. So, I'd very much get a blood test done to get an idea. I would 9 out of 10 say that people are deficient in vitamin D. The blood test is more so to have a look that when we do start recommending or we do start kind of adding in a supplement of that we have a baseline that when we recheck in about 3 months' time, because it does take a while for the stores of the vitamin D to kind of build up, that we can then have a look and make sure that we're not necessarily overdosing vitamin D from that side. Not that the downfalls are huge, but that you can overdose on vitamin D. You've got to be taking significant amounts, but it is a thing that I would be aware of in understanding that.
Yeah, and that's a huge consideration too whenever we're talking about supplementation with vitamins, that understanding there's fat soluble and water soluble vitamins, and there is a possibility to overdose on fat soluble vitamins, whereas water soluble, you just, whatever isn't used is just excreted. So in that, again, follow the recommended doses, like those are there for a reason, but understanding there is a difference whenever we're looking into individual vitamins, that you just need to have that awareness and that consideration.
Yeah. Now, in terms of that, again, the blood test analysis will help us give an indication of how aggressive we could be on dosing of that. But I generally would look at, in a normal range, if we were, I'd probably look at about 3,000 IUs of vitamin D per day. You can do a lot higher, but please understand that you now need to measure this. You need to kind of look at these things. Understand what the side effects are to be doing that and going up to. I've in the past run much higher levels. It's funny enough, vitamin D deficiency was one of the issues that I had when I first started really diving into things, and I was dosing at about 10,000 IUs a day, and it took 15,000 IUs a day to bring my vitamin D levels back up to its within a normal range at about 3 months' time. So just to give you a practical example of it's something that you need to kind of work on, but I would very much recommend people taking, at least probably 3,000 IUs a day of vitamin D as a supplement form, understanding that there are a lot of other benefits to it. Vitamin D supplementation can restore testosterone in people who have a deficiency. So it is synthesized and it does help in terms of that. So males from that side, females need testosterone as well. It's not taboo, and it's a fun fact. Females do actually produce testosterone. It's just at a much lower percentage or much lower kind of milligram or nanoliter, than males would from that side. So vitamin D is high up on my list in terms of that. So we've probably got the top
got
four.
Four.
There's one that I would add in.
Yeah, let's go with one more and have a
pack of 5, essentially, is it? And this is probably the baseline that I would look at, is a very, and again, I think there's a couple things to this one. This is going to be your most expensive supplement that you spend money on, other than whey protein if we were, but whey protein actually kind of works out to be pretty reasonable when you look at it per serving, is it's going to be some form of fish oil. So, cod liver oil, and I generally wouldn't necessarily go cod liver, just tastes terrible, but you can do with a omega-3 based oil is what I'm going to be looking at. And I'm predominantly going to be looking at my ratio of my EPA to DHA within the supplement that I take from that omega-3 or that fish oil supplementation that I do. We're looking for about 2 grams of EPA to 1.5 grams of DHA per day. So if you can find a ratio or split that works pretty well with that. Natural pharmaceuticals, again, from iHerb, has a very good formula. They do a tablet and they do an oil. Most supplement brands will do an oil. It does leave aftertaste and a fishy smell. That is the downside of understanding, like taking these things. There are some better ones. I've just forgotten the brand off the top of my head. Dwayne used to do some work with them. Dr. Dwayne used to do some work with them. I've forgotten. ATP Science. ATP Science? ATP Science make a fish oil or triglyceride oil that is actually extremely good, very high in EPA to DHA recommendations. And again, I would just stick with the recommendation on the bottle there. But omega-3s is probably the one that most people lack. Omega-3s are very, very important. I run most of my clientele at high omega-3 ratios and high omega-3 supplementation and or foods that are omega-3 based in terms of fats, purely for inflammatory responses, purely for like health recommendations, cholesterol, heart health kind of comes into this as well. Fats are not the enemy. And I think there was a bit like fats got a bad rap a while ago for like a whole bunch of things. And we saw some real bad decline in like health markers, cardiovascular health, blood pressure, organs kind of had a huge take on or took a huge knock from like our lower fat diets. But omega-3 is predominantly the high ratio of fats that I want to see in my clientele or people from that side. And supplementing with an omega-3 based fish oil would be highly recommended. But, and once again, this is extremely important. Please do not buy fish oils from your supermarket or your grocery. What we've seen when we start to do through third-party testing and batch testing of those is they sit there for a long time and they go rancid. And now you're essentially putting like not an off oil, but essentially like an off an oil that doesn't have the ratios that we want into your system and into your body, and you're not necessarily getting the benefits of the omega-3 that we're looking for. You want to utilize, like, I don't want to say fresh oils, but buy from reputable companies. Thorn make a good one, once again, practitioner based. Once you open the bottle or you open like the container that you use it. Don't let it lie around. And if it does lay around for like a month, unfortunately, toss it and buy a new one. It's one of those things that you don't want to kind of mess around with.
Yeah, I'm glad that you pointed that out because it's a unique one that not only like it being introduced, like oxidizing from that exposure once the seal's broken, but also it's a unique one that the bottle matters. That if you're getting it in a clear bottle, that is not one that you want. That the like sunlight will actually have an impact on it. So that's why
Yep.
often any reputable one is going to have it in like a brown bottle to help with those UV rays. But
And
to
some
your
will even
point, like
keep it in the fridge.
yeah, it's one that you want to do your research, do your due diligence, and make sure you're going through a reputable company so you can have a quality product and you're not just throwing your money away or introducing levels that you're not expecting and that you don't want that aren't having the benefit that you're looking for.
Yeah. I think off most of my stacks that I run and like minimals, that's pretty much it. I've got one or two extras that I'd add in possibly, but they're more a little bit unique. But I would go with those are probably my top 5 supplements or top 5 base supplement stack that I would be very happy to use year round. And not have to cycle, not have to change anything pretty much. The only difference is going to be if I want vanilla flavored whey or chocolate flavored whey, to be 100% honest. That's going to be the differentiating when I play around with that. But year round, I can run all of those at the base dosage if we were, keep that in, and I'd be very happy for any clientele to be taking that recommendation on and utilizing that. And I think you'd see effective results. You'd see an ability to kind of like change your physique, change the things that kind of come up from that side, but it would be a very baseline dose of everything and a very easy way to utilize supplements for the effect that they are there for in terms of this game in health or the pursuit of health of what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I think that's a excellent list and a good starting stack for people. If you're listening to this and you want to hear a part two, or what some of those more advanced ones would be, or some like a addition to
More in
it,
depth,
just
yeah.
let us know. Yeah.
Yeah, that could be a fun podcast. But yeah, on that note, guys, we hope you got some information from that. I actually think this was an informative one. Started with some camper jam, ended with some fish oil. I feel like that's what it's here for. That's what what you
Yeah,
come
it's
here
a
for.
healthy balance.
It's a healthy balance. What was our original thing? It's like grab your monster, come for the laugh, stay for the education, or something like that. Do you remember
Yeah.
we had we had a tagline, we had a slogan at one stage, and I think it just like tapped off. But yeah, we appreciate you guys. If there's anything you would like us to cover further in the future, shoot us a DM. We're always up for options or suggestions. Other than that, be safe and have a good week.